Good afternoon. I'm Samantha Subin. I'm a technology reporter at CNBC. I'm thrilled to be here today moderating this panel on generative AI from a business perspective. Since the launch of ChatGPT in 2022, we've seen generative AI evolve from a promising experiment to an essential business tool. Now we're entering a new reality that's going to redefine the way we work in the decades to come. Microsoft has described this shift through the concept of the frontier firm, a new organizational structure centered around hybrid teams and aimed at boosting productivity and creativity. Here, people work alongside AI agents and assistants, guiding them to complete tasks and drive results. But the real question is, how do companies actually get there? What does it take to transform traditional workflows? And how do we unlock AI's full potential while also managing risks? To help unpack that, I have a fantastic group of panelists here with me today, ranging from finance, tech, organizational, strategy backgrounds, and we're going to dive into how they're reshaping the next phase of AI adoption. To kick things off, I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves and briefly discuss their role in AI adoption at their firms. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure. My name is William Bundy. I'm a partner and the lead of value creation for private equity firms at McKinsey. My role in kind of the private equity in adoption of AI is like working with private equity investors and really trying to drive actual cash returns as you're actually implementing AI. To be blunt, not everyone has done that, right? There's a lot of withholds in order to get there. Some of the biggest ones are around the actual IT adoption that they already currently have, right? That's one of the biggest pieces. There is actually an underlying IT project, huge change management, as well as then actually the change management to get people to use AI. And we'll talk more about that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Martinez. I'm a partner and head of Mercer's Sentinel Group. That is Mercer's internal operational risk and governance team. Over the past 26 years, I've worked in the intersection of investment strategy, operations, and the fiduciary risk around it. I think we're at a really, really exciting time, particularly in our space. We're not just talking about AI anymore, we're implementing it into our day-to-day. So my comments will kind of view around the fiduciary lens and perspective, the human side and the change management side as we begin to use these tools. Mercer Sentinel evaluates about 800 managers every 2 years. So we have a unique front row seat from boutique and emerging managers to some of our big complex investment giants who are all using AI currently today. So I think we have a lot of different perspectives and nuances that we see, and look forward to chatting with this panel today. Thank you.
I'm Falguni Desai. I'm with Microsoft. I work in a financial services industry advisory role where I work with a lot of large financial institutions and banks, helping them understand how to use our platforms to really help them achieve the business outcomes they're looking for. And so it's no surprise that we're focused on AI and our Copilot platforms and our Azure platforms that support agent building. And so where my focus lies is not necessarily with any one product set, but more around the use cases that are relevant for financial professionals, how they're using generative AI in their workflows, and what kind of value creation and profitability they can gain from that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yu. I work for BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager. I personally belong to Aladdin Engineering Group. Aladdin is the risk and trading platform and the software offering of BlackRock. It has 4,000 to 5,000 engineers. So I can see BlackRock application of AI in 3 buckets to bring better client experience, to assist the investment process, and to improve the employee productivity. I personally, day-to-day, oversee the AI research function for client-facing and internal-facing AI tools.
Hi, I'm Harvey Stein. Presently work at 2 Sigma. Started 4 years ago in the labs group doing general research around the firm, and recently switched over to option market making because previous to 2 Sigma, I was 30 years at Bloomberg building up the quant group, doing option pricing models across all sectors and risk models, credit risk and market risk, and also teach risk management at Columbia University, the master's in quant finance program in the math department.
Great, thank you all. So I know we're all familiar with ChatGPT, some of the other LLM models from Anthropic, Google. I'm curious if each of you could talk a little bit about what models you've been implementing and what is actually working when it comes to using AI in the workforce. Maybe Harvey, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, well, I've just seen people using it for everything. I mean, just like every other new toy, everybody wants to use it and try it out. And, if you're a kid, you're feeding your truck to your dog, and some of it works, some of it doesn't work.
Yeah, I can talk about, so I mentioned the 3 areas BlackRock use AI. The last bucket, employee productivity, that is general. Every firm can use it, right? We actually use a lot of Microsoft built tools because Office Suite is great and you add AI on top is even better. But for the investment process is unique, it's true to alpha seeking, the secret of BlackRock. So we have virtual investment analyst called Asimov that is built to consolidate information on firms, sectors, macroeconomic of private and public sources and make portfolio analytics on top of it. For the client servicing, we have a chatbot embedded in Aladdin that can answer questions from Aladdin users on how to use Aladdin, the portfolio facts, the cash positions, the risk analytics, so it becomes an integrated part of the software offering.
Yeah, I'll answer this a little bit differently because obviously we're one of the providers of AI platforms. What I see in the market is actually sort of 3 layers of adoption happening, and different firms are at different points in their journey of adoption. So typically what we see is people adopting the Copilot, the M365 Copilot, that's the AI that's in the Office suite, and they get this general level of productivity across the entire employee base, or at least for the employees that use it. This is things like meeting summarization, document summarization, better search functionality across your files, things like that, email drafting and so forth. It's not anything groundbreaking, and I think most firms have kind of adopted it to some level. In fact, we know that statistically 75% of the Fortune 500 are using that platform now. The second layer I see typically after that is building some type of agent using our platforms that extends beyond the Office suite. And that usually brings a level of employee productivity in the HR, intranet, searching for policies, procedures, looking for information about, how to file an expense, book travel, those types of things. So there are agents now that people have built in companies to allow for that to be a lot easier. And then the third level of productivity I see is actually around more of the front office, back office types of business processes that Yuri was just mentioning, around different types of workflows. So if you're an investment analyst, or if you're working in a banking role, or if you're in a risk management role, there may be different types of agents that are available on third-party platforms that can work with Azure or that are homegrown and built using our platforms. And that allows for the business process to become a little bit more automated, faster, maybe reduce some of the manual errors. So those are kind of the 3 ways that I'm seeing most firms adopt AI currently. And then, of course, there's also firms that are trying to be even more innovative with, building multiple agents, agent-to-agent productivity. That's what we would call the frontier firm.
Great comments. I'll make 2 comments, one of what we're doing internally and one what we're seeing from our conversation with asset managers and asset owners. One, what we're doing from a research, we have about 200 plus researchers on the investment due diligence side. We have about 45 people globally doing research on the operational due diligence side. When you think about that force, AI, the large language model has really been a force multiplier. From people that write detailed research reports to using LLMs to get through their day has really been a game changer. Whether it's assessing documents, whether it's writing language, there is a little bit of risk to that as we're going slowly to make sure It's not garbage in, garbage out. That ties to data. So that's what we're seeing with asset owners and asset managers. Those really kind of focused on good data hygiene, making sure that their organization is really, really tight with data. They're the ones that are really going to use this AI, large language models, as a strategic advantage to their business. Those smaller firms that may not be well as equipped as those larger managers are kind of playing behind the 8 ball and really are kind of faced with a decision. Do you buy or build? Do you get the talent organically to grow this, or do you leverage third-party partnerships in order to take advantage of this technology? So we do see a lot of haves and have-nots. We are looking and using large language models. For example, we have a proprietary built system, but it only accesses information that Mercer has. Now, Mercer happens to be a very large consultant agency with businesses across the industry, so there's a ton of internal information to be able to access. But if you're a smaller firm and don't have that robust data or research or information, you're not really going to benefit of that. We're allowed to use ChatGPT, but we have a compliance ring fence around it, meaning anything I put in there, I can't copy and paste confidential information. That's a control that Mercer is putting on part of this technology. And that's a best practice that we would like to see at asset managers. So it's a really, really interesting race right now. The more resourced are focusing on data and taking advantage of it.
It's kind of an interesting time, right? I'm old enough to remember, like, barely, but old enough to remember like 1990 and when everyone was like still getting the personal computer. I remember when I got mine, right?
This big.
Yeah, I was this big.
82.
If you think about right now,
It came out, the personal computer.
yeah,
IBM PC.
yeah, and so
You
when
remember the AT when it had a hard drive?
and so when I think about 2025 with AI, I think about the same time period, right? It's about 80% adoption. People are still trying to figure out exactly how to work it. They're trying to integrate it into their businesses. To be honest, not everyone's successful. We've done some analysis on that, and right now we are seeing about 80 to 90% of the population of all of the companies really are just using an advanced search with ChatGPT. That's it. About 5% truly are getting to the point where they're actually outsourcing business processes. Now, the key breakthrough that we've seen is twofold. One, the newer models actually allow you attribution, right? It actually allows you to identify where the data is coming from, which allows people to intervene and check. The second is the contextual engineering, which then allows it to actually break down the incremental steps, which then allows humans better into the loop as it actually goes through its workflow and work process, right? You can actually check a JSON file. You can actually check the Excel that it puts out to. That allows the human to be in the loop and actually create a better outcome. What we're seeing now is the future, though, and what really creates a distinctive advantage for firms is one, proprietary technology or proprietary knowledge, right? Just like other consulting firms, right? McKinsey has a treasure trove of over 40 years, 100 years, if you really go all the way back, of data, right? We understand how companies have operated. We understand what best in class looks like. Integrating that into our tools and allowing and training our models against that data set allows us to have a bit of a competitive advantage around kind of when we're looking at things. The second thing is truly the operating model that you generate around it, right? The models are going to continue to evolve. The ability of the model is going to continue to evolve. How do you adjust what you're allowing the model to do versus not? And then what is the governance that you put into place in the process, right? So with those contextual engineering spots, you can actually insert like a bias filter. You can insert a governance structure that says, listen, this is not in accordance with our organizational policy. Rewrite this. And the agent will do that for you. So those are the critical steps that you need to really start thinking about as you start bringing this into scale.
I think what you're saying about search is very interesting because, I mean, you could, pre large language models, you could go to Google and get a box and index all your data and have a search, like kind of essentially have an internal search, Google search engine, right? But Google search kind of hinges on PageRank, which requires cross links, right? It's essentially a citation index. The most important thing is the one that has the most citations. Now, LLMs don't do that. And and they don't work that way. And your internal data doesn't work that way either. You don't have cross links in all your internal data. You just have a lot of documents, a big pile of documents. LLMs, by virtue of the fact that they work by syntactic similarity, they can group them together, and they can, which is sort of bringing the original Google model to your internal documents without needing all the cross links.
Yeah, I can comment on that. I think that most of the internal firm search don't work out that well because they are lacking this feedback loop and the sophisticated data indexing. But when people try to build a chatbot or like a sophisticated search on top, they realize now suddenly they need a good search engine that rank other things according to relevancy.
And I was being a bit flippant when I said that most people are already using it for search. Like if I talk about my mom or my kids, they are using it, right? Like it's just a glorified Google
You
search.
can't get away from using it from search. You go into Google, and that's the first thing it gives you is the AI response.
But when we really start talking about business utility of it, right? At this point, what you do is you can actually use the LLM to say, hey, how should I prompt you in order to solve this world-class problem? You do that a few times, and you start with like, whatever, the ChatGPT, the cheap one, and then you go down to the point that you literally have a 7-page prompt with insertion and intervention points, and then you feed that into the model, and when that output is literally it's similar to a first-year analyst. Right now, the key concept is you shift from being a doer to a reviewer. Mm-hmm. It doesn't necessarily eliminate the person in the loop, but the person that used to do all the analytics, the 4 hours to put together that first draft of the model, the LLM largely can do that with some contextualization. That person then is responsible for reviewing it. That's why you're seeing a reduction in the overall workforce in the postgraduate classes, right? And you're seeing escalation of the workforce in the people that have some experience. You do need that dedicated, experienced judgment in order to really make LLMs thrive.
It puts a huge burden on the reviewer, right? As we become, in my job, as we become writers to editors, the skill set to write's a lot different than the skill set to review someone's writing and make sure it's right. We already have a case this year, right, of work that was hastily reviewed and provided to a government, and it was wrong, and very negative press around that. That's when we have these new shiny toys, as we're talking, we're so quick to run to use it, and we're feeling pressure from our boards and CEOs to use it now because there's so much CapEx in this space. We really need to slow down. For those that work in fiduciary channels like pensions or defined contribution, you have investment boards, you need explainability, right? If you're gonna implement AI into your process, if you're an asset manager, you have to update your Form ADV Part 2. You gotta think about these disclosures and think about when you're up in front of that chairman and performance isn't great, and you have to explain AI in your investment process. So really kind of synthesizing that, prompting is a skill, right? As we think about work, our jobs are fundamentally changing in how we do them, but how we think about them. And those skills and the jobs of the future are really going to be different. And I think prompting, compliance, empathy, communication, those are going to be the premiums in our space as we rush to implement this technology.
So I want to jump in here because you guys are getting a bit into some of the challenges that have come up with LLMs. I'm curious what isn't working in practice. What do we need to improve on for these tools to actually be as helpful as we want them to be? Maybe you could start off from the financial perspective where it's falling.
Sure, yeah, and I'm also a tool builder, so I'm very conscious on what the user demand is. So it also differentiates on the use cases. If it's a client-facing, you don't have the internal employees doing the last human review, so they are not there to catch any errors. So if you develop those type of applications, the guardrails are very important. So it's input guardrails to prevent your tool from doing things it's not supposed to do, but there's no human to tell it what it's not supposed to do, right? So you have off-topic, investment advice, toxic prompt injection, a long list of things that you need to automatically catch and with high accuracy. And then you also have the output hallucination. LLM is famous for hallucination, so how do you automatically capture those to the point that you feel comfortable presenting this directly to clients? Those are things, if you build client-facing tools, you definitely need to check out. Even for the employee productivity, another thing for the client-facing tool It's also about people's tolerance for latency. If you do Google search, you expect the answer to come back in sub 1 second. You can do a deep thinking model, but not everyone is going to wait online for 15 minutes for the results to come back, right? So you have to trade off. Do you call the deep thinking model when people only have patience for 10 seconds? So you may not need to, you don't have the luxury to call the deep thinking mode. You have to really optimize your process. For the internal employee facing, it's about building tools to facilitate people's checking. You know that if you have a long LLM output, you don't give the source citation, you don't point to the original document, it's very difficult for people to check. You can say, oh, this information extraction from private portfolio company, quarterly reporting or semi-annual reporting is 92%. I just can't tell you what 8% mistake is. Then it's taking human equal amount of time to go and match numbers one by one, right? So your extraction tool has to not only say what numbers it extracts, it has to say which line in the original document and build a convenient AI for people to validate so it truly gives you the benefit of automation. So there are all kinds of tools needed to make the human work well with machines and drive adoption.
Yeah, it's kind of trained on all the text. It's trained on everything on the internet, right? So it must know everything there is to know about cats, right?
I don't know where to go with that one, but I do like cats, but yeah. Where I see, I agree with a lot of what you guys said, that, there are areas where the data going in from the clients is probably not ready yet, right? So there's a lot of time spent by institutions, large corporations who want to use an agent, who want to use generative AI, but maybe the data is not clean enough, maybe it's not consolidated, maybe it's not indexed properly. And so there's quite a bit of preparation time before you can actually use generative AI and get a really powerful kind of output out of it. The other piece I think that's important is also the training, the upskilling, sort of how you go about adoption, because it's one thing to have a co-pilot and use it in the Office suite. Even there, prompting is important. Learning how to prompt, how to write a prompt. It's different than writing a Google search, as most people probably know. But the better you get at prompting, the better you understand what kind of outputs you can get with different types of prompts. Sharing those kind of use cases among different colleagues in the company, having a champions network, having, training that just goes beyond sort of the 100 or 200 level. Those things are very important in terms of how you see the profitability, the value creation that you want to get out of Gen AI. If you kind of just stop at the 100 level, you probably won't get too far with your outcomes.
Yeah, two areas I'd highlight. One, we're kind of struggling with job hugging a little bit. Bunch of researchers that are smart, that know what this technology is doing, and maybe not be incentivized to sort of run into using a large language model. And I think they point at some of the flaws. I think you were making, quick and dirty answers, or DeepSeek, I got to wait 15 minutes to get the answers. I don't know about everyone in the audience. I've never asked ChatGPT a question that didn't think it was a great idea or a great question. So there is some over-reliance on the information that you do get out of these tools. So be humble, understand what you have, and that's where governance and oversight comes in. One area I want to highlight too, we're talking about all the good, all the efficiencies, hopefully the revenue generating aspects we could implement this technology. We can't forget the bad guys have this. Deepfakes have happened in this industry already. Millions of dollars have been wired out of banks and funds because of deepfakes. So that is a real thing. As we're thinking about all the good, we also have to keep our eye towards the bad, and how do we protect our employees? How do we protect our clients' information? And this is where cybersecurity spend and tech spend need to increase year over year, because the bad guys are just getting better. Just like our large language model, when we first rolled it out at Mercer, it was okay. It was frustrating to use because you knew how good ChatGPT was. Fast forward today, it's humming along because it's had more data, more people are using it. It's getting exponentially better. So that's the other thing we can't forget about this technology. It's at a point in time right now where we're all illuminated by it, but it's going to continue to get better, better, and better, and I think more invisible to business processes. So that upskilling, the awareness beyond just mom and pop, but to that junior, that sophomore in college, we need to prepare them as they're more like a third-year associate versus coming in entry level, because quite frankly, those jobs are getting removed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to question a little bit how far it can go with this particular approach, right, of textual similarity, which is kind of what it's doing. In a certain respect, the only way we have of encoding knowledge is in text, right? In books, we write it down. We explain it, whether it's symbolic in mathematics or otherwise, right? So the fact that these things are working by textual similarity is almost kind of like the way we learn. You know, like monkey see, monkey do. And so in that respect, it's kind of like a thinking machine very much. And maybe we already have general artificial intelligence. It's just not, you know, really smart general artificial intelligence, right? Because when you ask it something, and if you start playing with these things, right, and you try to trick them or try to get answers to things that are a little more obscure, you find it making up things. You find it can't find the mistake. You find that you can get it to contradict itself. So there's a question of how far can you get with kind of syntactic similarity.
There's definitely limitations, right? And that's why, like, I think everyone that really knows this technology well says at this point in time, a human has to be in the loop unless there's like certain use cases where it doesn't, or you're willing to accept a certain level of error that as a business process, you're just willing to accept. Now
you have like that example, right, of that car dealership, which put a LLM chatbot to answer questions, and some guy got it to sell him a car for $1.
so there's always
They
going to
didn't
be
accept it. They didn't honor it, but
with any technology, right? There's always going to be some issues. I think the thing that we just have to really kind of think through is what is the operating model that works at this point in time? Where do humans need to intervene? If I was that car dealership, before I processed a car at $1, I'd have a human take a look at it and go, "Nah, we're not going to sell you this for $1." Right? It's a pretty easy thing, but
that's a great use case, right? Because that's the use case of the call center, right? Instead of having, you know, a call center with 100 people answering the phones and talking to every individual with, you know, with their frequently asked questions list and just reading off of it, you have the you have the LLM generating this stuff, and the person's just there signing off on them.
So this is where I think, right, so if you just take LLMs, I agree with you that you potentially have those issues. What you actually find, though, is it's the marriage between LLMs and traditional machine learning and other algorithms, right? So what you can potentially have happen is that the LLM puts out, hey, I'm about to say this. You have a governance or a fact checker that comes in over top and goes, listen, the average price for this is between $15,000 and $18,000. Right now you're saying $1. Please rerun your analysis. And then the bot goes and does it again. So like when you really get into multi-agentic flows, you actually do have one agent doing its steps, coming back out, goes to a manager agent. The manager agent says yes, no, or a fact checker says yes, no. Sometimes what you'll also do is you'll have one bot or one agent that's actually focused on the positive, the other one focused on the negative, and then you have a moderator in between, and then you have a fact checker to make sure that it's not hallucinating. All of those things are accessible and doable, and within kind of bandwidth timeframes that you're talking about, that gets you to a higher resolution, that gets you within, I'll say, business accuracy.
Yeah, I can add on that. So usually the large financial institutions have internal governance process for different new use cases, be it traditional financial model or machine learning model or now AI model, and they rate the risky level of the application by what it's trying to do, what is triggering, what are the consequences if something goes wrong. So the answering questions is generally not very high risk. At most, you have reputational risk if you give a wrong answer, but triggering an action like selling a car or doing a transaction on client behalf or doing some processes that you're the human oversee is a high risk application. So that
Right.
bar has to be a lot higher.
That's why in finance, right, you see certain applications in financial industry and others where it's a little slower, right? Like, for example, fraud detection. Fraud detection is nice because you can just flag something and somebody looks into it. And there's not a lot of regulation as opposed to, aside from the fact that you have to do it, right? Loan underwriting is a whole nother ballgame. Loan underwriting, you have to analyze individuals and see whether you're going to make a loan to them. And there are all sorts of laws against biases. And once you start saying that there has to be a law that you can't be biased in various ways, then suddenly how do you validate that your machine learning model, it hasn't just picked up biases and is applying them? It's not so easy.
Yeah. So I think, what you're getting at is different use cases and where the technology is sort of a slam dunk. And I think what we've seen in our client base is that the call center, customer support use cases, it's generally worked well. Companies have gotten a lot of value out of it in terms of time savings. Microsoft itself has used this technology for our own support, and we've saved somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million by using different types of agents and call routing and a combination of different types of Gen AI put together. When you get into some of those other types of scenarios, like say underwriting or mortgage applications or investment banking workflows, right? There needs to be a lot more human judgment, a lot more committee review, a lot more traditional wisdom, right? If you're somebody who's worked on deals for a long time, you probably know whether the model is coming out right or whether your due diligence has something that you need to take a deeper look at. But we do think there are some very, proven use cases now in that customer support space that, most companies have gotten some value out of it. But I do think even if you push this to its limits, like we call it the frontier firm, and you have orchestrators and multiple agents, I think you have to be careful when you put this in front of clients. We have not seen a lot of institutions put this technology directly in front of clients. Most of the use cases I've seen are internal facing for internal, bankers to use or for advisors to use or customer support to use. Putting it out directly in front of a client for the reasons you mentioned, the risk of getting it wrong and the penalty, the fine you will pay for getting it wrong could be a whole lot higher than the amount of money you might save. And so I think that's where the caution has come in.
So how far can we actually take this technology, and to what extent can it actually replace a human workforce?
You want to take that?
I think we're in the middle. I think we're still in like the third inning of that right now in terms of retrofitting our business processes to be able to capitalize off this. The panel before talked about the fax machine. That's still a very, very relevant tool in our industry when communicating corporate actions across banks, the fax machine. Right? Until that's completely weeded out of our system, I still think there's a lot of dry powder to improve our day-to-day processes. Look at trading, for example. I think we talked about that at our prep. There's aspects of our industry that went full in on automation, algorithms. AI isn't a new thing for investments. We just called it different things. APIs, bots, it's all been incorporated. So I think now it's starting to hit. For me, the big difference, it's hitting kind of more the human job, the call centers, helping people, on the distribution side, send out more prospecting emails. So that's been kind of the evolution of hitting these parts of our business that are still very brick and mortar, touching a lot of paper, calling callbacks, calling people to make sure they're there. I don't think we get rid of a lot of those things because those brick and mortar things help protect the digitization and the speed of everything. I think we need to rethink new ways to oversee this technology as we evolve. But I still think third inning, we have a little whiles to go till we sort of completely digitize our investment processes.
So I'm going to say that maybe I'm a bit more of an optimist, and I think that we're in the first inning, right? And because right now I think that general business processes, I think you can largely determine an op model that works. I think that there's industry specific that still needs to go through. Right? There's going to be a wave of that probably in the next 2 to 3 years. I think that there's more that can actually be done once you actually start getting into a discussion of, and this is a bit futuristic, right? But I don't think we're going to get to AGI, right? There's a very big discussion there when it actually has to think of its own thoughts. But the interface between large language models and healthcare, soft tissue analysis, because it also can understand patterns in pictures, right? So that's an amazing front that is still out there. Large language models, once you actually start putting it into a mechanical interface, right? You look at Tesla Optimus. How much longer until the capital curve comes down so low that a robot costs all of a sudden $25,000, training it is $25,000, replacement cost is less than 1 year's salary? What happens then? Right? There's a lot more to this that we're not fully thinking through. I think even as a society, that we really need to start beginning to really comprehend. But I do think that we're still in way early innings right now.
I also think that, you can, what you said about, there's going to be more that you can do with this that we don't even know yet. But I also think some of that is about experimentation and learning and evolving and keeping that going inside your company. Some of it is also top down in terms of, is your leadership being intentional about where they want to use it and where they still want the high touch, right? We have that in electronic trading as well. We have still people where trades where humans are still required. And I think every business has to make that choice to say, this is my distinction, or this is where my human experience really matters. And that's going to be a distinguishing factor for your value proposition as a firm. So I think being very intentional about saying, this is where I really want to push it as far as it can go with the tech. And these are areas where I'm going to reserve and keep my human talent because of the wisdom, experience, and sort of human touch that they bring.
Yeah, I feel like the scary part of predicting AI adoption is the underlying technology is evolving fast. ChatGPT came out in the end of 2022, and the lead table of all the models keep refreshing on a monthly, weekly basis. Every other month, a new open source model come out, the closed source model keep getting better. Is it going to continue to grow at this trajectory, or is going to taper out? How much new skills it can still acquire? Should we judge it based on its today's capability, or make some projections, and what trajectory that projection should follow? That's the challenging part.
So, if you go back to, let's see, when was it? I guess the 80s. Does anybody remember 4GLs? 4GLs, fourth generation languages. We weren't gonna need programmers anymore, and because you could just program in natural language. Okay, you don't remember it because it never worked, right? So now, do we have that now? Maybe to some extent, except you have to review it and you have to know what you're doing, and you have to debug it. And anybody who writes software knows that actually debugging somebody else's code is harder than writing it yourself. So now there's a question of how useful this is going to be in a certain respect. Another historical item that I'd like to bring up when we start thinking about where these things are going is the internet itself, right? 1980s, they were just building the internet. The ARPANET was being split into the DARPANET and the MILNET with mail bridges, mail gateways connecting them. Who, when we were building this, ever thought that there would be a .com bubble in 2000? And who ever thought when any of this was being built, even after the .com bubble in 2000, that the internet would be saving us during a pandemic and allowing us all to work from home? These things just weren't envisioned. So, we have so many different things that go on. It's imagination. It can go anywhere, certain respect.
There's kind of a conversation of what really is this, right? It's not a panacea, right? It's not an all-seeing God that can make decisions for us. It's a technology, right? Technologies will be used. I liken this more to like a microprocessor or the computer itself, right? It's something that you can put into a workflow or a process that makes it better. Now, human innovation and entrepreneurs will take this in a million different levels. And that's the beautiful part. Like, I look at America and I look at the entrepreneurship that is going to be burgeoning in this generation. And I am excited to see what our generations are going to be able to develop with this technology. Just like the microprocessor, right? There's going to be a Steve Jobs that comes out of this generation. I'm excited to see that black turtleneck that I always hated come back in, right? But like, this is an exciting time in business. It's an exciting time on a technological front that we all can be a part of. Learn as much as possible about this technology. Start putting it into your processes. If you haven't already done it, take a look at OpenAI SDK. You can put together your own multi-agent workflows, or use Stack AI. You can use it and you can put them together. You can actually see how the agents can talk to each other. You can see how the workflows work, and then see what you can actually develop. I will tell you that once you really start using it and start putting this all together, you're going to be amazed at what we're going to be able to accomplish in this generation. I'm excited.
It's a technology that's making almost every organization rethink how they do business, who they do business with, and where they do business across the globe. It's got impact on right shoring. It's got impact on org charts. And that's where I think we're going to go. We're going to see companies that have 10 people, right, that are $1 billion valuation because they're leveraging this. Are we there yet? Maybe first inning, third inning, still early baseball game. Let's agree on that.
It's definitely early.
And we shouldn't worry too much about the young generation. They grew up with the technology. We had the summer interns coming in, and they did code that 75% were written by AI, supervised by them. We posed some challenges on exactly what your AI wrote in this code, but they are very native. I think the existing employees has to adapt, but the new generation are already trained on these things.
I mean, I remember getting trained on COBOL, so this is amazing.
I do want to pose one final question based off of what you said, You said younger generations, they know how to use these models. How do you get older generations to adopt them? Is there hesitancy that you're facing?
I think they're the ultimate explainability, right? We have more demographics working with each other right now. If you can't explain to a baby boomer how this is working, you're never going to get that approval at a committee. So I think that's sort of the different ages in our workforce right now are really pushing this technology to be fit for purpose, essentially.
Yeah. And I would say, look, I work for Microsoft, but I'm not somebody who's a AI zealot. I think I had some hesitancy, probably a year and a half ago. And I had I kept trying it and using it. And I had this what I call the moment of enlightenment around, oh, I can use this and look at the result I got. I never thought I could do that with Copilot or with an agent. And I think the more you try it for different things, you will come upon your moment of enlightenment that kind of then makes you think, okay, what else can I do with this? So if you're somebody who hasn't tried it yet, I would encourage keep trying different scenarios. And if you do know it, just keep learning and keep pushing the limits on it. Obviously within a guardrailed sandbox if you're experimenting, but I think there's still a lot you can do. And I think we're at the beginning of a 20-year curve with this technology.
I remember the first time I played paintball. Right. And I didn't want to go because I heard it hurt. But then I went and played and it was amazing. Right. You get hit once and you're just like, oh, OK, I can deal with it. I can deal with the pain. And then you go and actually are able to just excel. You go and you actually play, you're taking over forts, taking over captures, flags, whatever. the first time that I played with ChatGPT, I was amazed at its technology. I think that when people really start to get in there and actually start really using it, even the older generations, it's easy enough. You literally just can talk to it, tell it exactly what you want. Like it's a 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old gives you exactly what you need. You just have to go and double check to make sure that the 2-year-old didn't bring you something that it hallucinated on.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't give you back what a 2-year-old would give you.
Sometimes it does. And you know what? You just ask it to fix it. And it does it.
I feel like it takes a certain amount of courage in all the mid-level management, senior level management, whatever your status is. You need to be willing to experiment with the new technology and face the unknown and be not afraid of failure. Because the worst thing is you just keep doing what you do, right? But potentially you can gain a new assistant that is better than all your existing ones.
Well, there are already some really big winners, right? Like anybody who's selling hardware to run this, or leasing software to run this, right? That's what all the cloud computing is going to be really big on AI because it's sucking up cycles. You're paying for those, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, that wraps up our time here. I want to thank you all for participating. Thank the audience as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.